Good evening and welcome to Food Literacy for All. Food Literacy for All is hosted by the University of Michigan's Sustainable Food System Initiative. The 2025 course is organized around the theme of food and care. And tonight's panel is on food waste. Food Literacy for All is structured as an evening lecture series featuring different guest speakers each week to address diverse challenges and opportunities of both domestic and global food systems. By learning from activists, organizers, authors, and writers, food industry professionals, and scholars, we aim to ignite new conversations and deepen existing commitments to a more equitable, health-promoting, and ecologically sustainable food systems. At this time, I'd like to welcome briefly a guest, Lydia McMullen-Laird, Deputy Director of Zero Waste, who will briefly discuss University of Michigan Zero Waste Week and the Zero Waste Challenge. Welcome, Lydia.
Thank you so much, Shiloh, and thank you, Sammy and Taylor, and everyone from the Food Literacy for All group for giving us the opportunity to be here today. Y'all are pros at what you do. As Shiloh said, I'm here from the U of M Zero Waste Challenge, which is a collaboration between A20, EcoUM, the UM Sustainability Coalition, and zerowaste.org. And food waste is such an important part of our personal waste equation, as you'll hear so much more about today, which is why it's also a big focus for the Zero Waste Challenge that's happening right now at U of M. So we already have 600 people going zero waste this week to reduce our personal waste footprint, but also to create momentum around systemic change, both here at U of M and just in the surrounding community if you're a townie. So if you're interested in learning more about how to reduce your waste, and that includes food waste, and you'd like to be part of this effort, we invite you to join the challenge using the QR code on this slide, or if it's easier for you, you can also sign up at zerowaste.org/UMich. And as part of the challenge, you'll receive tips on how to reduce your waste. And we've also got a lot of amazing events happening, just like this one. We have a lot of fun prizes you can win just by participating, like a 3-week subscription to a produce box from Argus Farm Stand, 2 tickets to a Zingerman's food tasting event, gift certificates to Blank Slate Creamery, Comet Coffee, the Get Up Vintage, and so many more, all on our website. So if you like reducing waste and you want to win some cool stuff, join us. If you're here, I know some of you are here are already part of the challenge. Thank you so much for coming to this event. You're going to learn a ton about food waste from all these fabulous hosts. There's going to be a prompt at the end of these presentations that is going to invite you to share what you learned from today's event. So I encourage you to listen closely, take notes for your own learning, but also so you have something to share at the end. And that's what we're going to use to count as your attendance and for your prize entry. So thank you again so much for having us here today, and turning it back over to Shiloh.
Just a few more words about Food Literacy for All. This year's course is co-led by Dr. Bénédicte Beausoleil, Professor of Chair of Afro-American and African Studies here at University of Michigan, and myself, Shiloh Maples. We're joined by our community partners, which includes Oakland Avenue Urban Farm, the Detroit Food Policy Council, and the Detroit Black Community Food Sovereignty Network. In addition to our community partners, we have a fabulous team that makes this course possible. Sammy, the Food Literacy for All course coordinator, Taylor, graduate student instructor, Sai, the Sustainable Food System Initiative coordinator, Dr. Leslie Huey, the Sustainable Food System Initiative Advisory Committee, Chris Taylor from the College of Literature, Science, and Arts and Technology is our technology support, and Tiffany, who's our Food Literacy for All grader. Food Literacy for All is also made possible with the generous support from the Center for the Education of Women, Francis and Sydney Lewis Visiting Leaders Fund, the School for Environment and Sustainability, and the Program in the Environment. There are a lot of ways to engage with our course in addition to attending these live sessions. You can follow the Sustainable Food System Initiative on X and on Instagram. For our students, are using can interact with the poll questions using iClicker, using that QR code, and then all classes are filmed and available on the Sustainable Food System Initiative website. And with that, I will turn it over to Taylor.
All right. So for community members who are new here, every week we feature one student's video response to the readings for the week. I say this every week, it's always such a difficult choice. There are so many creative strategies students use to make a 1-minute video to share their personal reflections and responses to our readings. So this week we have Adarsh B. Adarsh is a senior undergraduate student in public health. I think that's accurate. And I really loved Adarsh's video, so let's check it out.
A new article. 1/3 of food wasted globally? Costing us 1 trillion every year?
Are we crazy for wasting this much food? Like, why are we wasting this much food, and who is contributing to these big numbers?
My mind is all over the place right now. Coming from a household that does not like wasting food, making sure to finish everything on your plate, this number is very surprising and very disheartening. It was very interesting to see two different terms in this article, food loss and food waste. Food loss occurring near or at the farm, and food waste occurring at the retail level. When I first learned about these terms, I assumed that there would be more food waste than food loss, because food loss can be controlled through chemicals and technology. However, not everyone has access to this technology and equipment, especially when it comes to storage and packing. And both of these problems are actually consistent in high-income and low-income countries. So where are our priorities at?
I really hope to be more conscious of my food wasting habits.
A new article.
All right. Excellent video. Super entertaining. I love that one. Thank you so much. Now we will move into our poll question. So we have a lot of new attendees tonight that are just from the community or participants in Zero Waste Week. So we do our polling in two ways. For students who are taking this class for a grade through University of Michigan, we use iClicker. And for everyone else, we use the Zoom polling feature. So if you're not an enrolled student in our class, please use the polling feature. Our poll question tonight to get us warmed up on the topic is, do you compost? The options are A, yes, I compost at home. B, sometimes, but I do not compost at home. Oh, C, no, I do not compost. Or D, I'm not sure. Poll opening now. Let's see where everyone's at here. All right, it looks like members of the community are mostly composting at home, whereas students are mostly composting, but not at home, which is interesting. Makes sense having community members who are participating in Zero Waste Week who are already composters. About 32 to 35% of folks, both in the community and that are students, are saying no, they do not compost. Wrapping up here, we're about hitting our numbers for student responses. As for students, 18% do compost at home, 41% compost, maybe on campus, but not at home. 37% do not compost, and 4% are not sure. So I'm excited. Let's get into this. We're going to have a great discussion about composting and so many other things. Let's pass this on then to Dr. Leslie Hui, who will lead our panel.
Thanks so much, Taylor, and everybody on the call and who makes this class possible. My name is Leslie Hui. I'm a faculty member at the University of Michigan in urban and regional planning, and I do most of my research and a lot of my teaching on food systems, which is one way that I know at least three of the panelists here tonight. I loved, Adarsh, your summary of one of the readings. I was going to bring up that same statistic about how, that many people, perhaps at least by now, have heard that we, on a global level, either lose or waste about 1/3 of the food that's produced. The topic of food waste is vast. There's a lot you can learn. So we're only going to tackle a small portion of the many ways you can reduce waste. So I'm excited that this is Zero Waste Week, so you can learn even more through that initiative. A lot of what we're going to focus on tonight is how you can repurpose so-called waste. And we also hope that you walk away from this panel with a wider conception of different kinds of waste connected to our food system that you might not normally think of. So to start, I'm going to just very briefly introduce our speakers, and then I'm going to give them a chance to tell us a little bit more about their journey to how they actually got to do the work that they're doing. First is Reneé Wallace. She's founder and CEO of Doers Edge LLC, executive director of Food Plus Detroit, and founder and CEO of Transform Community Change Leadership Institute and Lab in Detroit. I never know how you actually get any sleep, Reneé. John Kent is co-founder of Sanctuary Farms and president of the farm's sister organization, Sacred Spaces, also located in Detroit. And I also got to know him because he started a master's program in my program in urban and regional planning. And he's also a transformative food systems fellow here at the university. Hajime Sato, I'm just getting to know in this panel, but he was recommended to us by a colleague who was really impressed with his work. He is chef and owner of the sustainable sushi restaurant Sozai, located in Clawson, Michigan. And I went onto your Instagram and it says you're also a certified sake advisor, which I thought was great. And then Jamina Shupack, I've been working with on some research, and she's executive director of the Rich Earth Institute in Brattleboro, Vermont. So if we could bring all of you on so we can see your faces at this point. For us to get a more complete introduction to all of you and your backgrounds and work, and also so students in the audience in particular can learn about the circuitous paths that many of us take to end up working in diverse food systems careers. I wanted you each to take about 3 minutes to sum up your life. Give us a little synopsis of the path you followed to get to this moment with the work that you're doing now, and describe how food waste, either prevention or the repurposing of waste, relates to the work each of you do. We'll be able to go much deeper into all of that as we go through other questions that we have for you. But just give us a quick synopsis of how did you come to do the work you're doing, and what drives you. So maybe Reneé, you could start.
Hi, and good day to everyone. And I'm happy to be here with you all. And that's a loaded question. For me, it actually really started out with responding to a call, in my life that was involved around doing work that serves needs of people. So the Matthew 25 passage may be familiar with some of you, that when I was hungry, you gave me food. When I was thirsty, you gave me water. And so in 2008, that passage called me out of a personal space of life with food, because I was in it at a personal level prior to that. But to actually be in community beyond my friends and folks that I could get to come to my house when I did workshops out of my house. I started doing work in community with a close colleague of mine, Janine Hatcher, at Genesis Hope, and came out of the gate during the social forum and developed a youth entrepreneurship program, a market garden, compost system, farm stand, which evolved to Island View farmers market, really holding on to the legacy of the work begun by Gerald Harrison. So that was the space where he did his work he's one of the pioneers of urban agriculture. And so we were really cultivating work, building on the work of Gerald Harrison. That was the beginning of it. Probably the leap forward that got me deeper into the work around composting began in 2012, 2013, with hanging out with folks at Michigan State, talking about what's going to happen by 2050. They were talking about we aren't going to have enough food. And my grandson was 5, and I thought, you guys are crazy. What are you talking about? So leaned in and started really getting deeper into the working community around what was going on with food systems work. So I got engaged in the policy work, was involved in the passage of the Urban Ag Ordinance, have continued, along that policy path, and we'll probably get into more of that. Probably one of the big things that happened for me in the city was I was invited by Councilmember Benson to go to San Francisco when they took the first delegation to go look and see what other people were doing in 2015. And everywhere we went, they kept asking, "Are y'all composting?" And I was a guest. I was an add-on. I was the plus one. But that really helped to really propel, the work forward here around composting. And there are other things that we'll get to when we get into the depths of the conversation. But that's kind of how it all started. And so for me, it was about a gap that was in our system. And way back then, you couldn't even find food waste 10 pages back. If you Googled it, right? It was not a thing then, but we chose it as a primary focus of our work, and we've been consistent in that for the last 16 years.
Thanks so much, Reneé.
Mhm.
I learned so much from you when we worked with you and students worked with you on one of their capstone projects. You're a wealth of knowledge. So yeah, we'll dig in more into a lot of the other expertise and work that you've been doing. John, maybe you could build on that. How did you get into the work you're doing, and what is it that you're doing around closing the loop and other aspects related to repurposing waste, food waste?
Yeah, I come off the shoulders of Miss Reneé Wallace and many others, the Tim Campbells, Michael Edwards, Kadiri, the Michelle Jacksons, the Mark Covingtons, the Passions, the Gregs. Um, but really, how I came to this work was a quarter life crisis. I was caught in a situation where I was not happy with where I was working, and a dear friend of mine who also moved to Detroit, we were both in this conundrum, but our paths met while we were at Santa Monica College. And we started our relationship really pushing forward sustainability initiatives. And we would move on and matriculate to other paths. He would go to Berkeley, I would go to UCLA, but we would find ourselves in Detroit. I would come back home, and interesting enough, he was kind of tracing back his familiar roots. His great grandfather came here many years ago and raised his grandfather's mother, and then they found their way on the Western Front. But that said, um, Parker brought up the idea of compost, and it wasn't really being done um, seriously. And I went in my bag and I was like, well, that can't be true. So we went on this hunt of knowledge to, kind of talk with people to figure out this path forward. And in the midst of that, COVID hit, and then I thought, well, why don't we start a farm too? So unbeknownst to us, we were closing the food loop. And what that means is food not going into the landfill to continue to degrade our environment and push out methane, but instead being sourced locally to be able to decompose properly in its perfect resting place to make really great soil. And I'm proud of that's the endeavor that we've embarked on since then. And through this work, I've kind of found out that a part of my life's journey is this concept of waste, not only just looking at compost or food waste, but also looking at because I come from a background of sociology, right? So I'm always concerned with the folks or the people they would say with of the least of these, right? So, um, being a black man in a white supremacist society, some would consider my very being wasteful, or women, or that matter, or LGBTQ, or whatever. And I think we as a species have a responsibility to make sure everybody has a space and things are recycled and rehabilitated, restored, renewed uh, properly. So that has been my path. So it all started with the quarter life crisis, and I think this is my redemption arc, hopefully, in the story.
Well, I'm also glad that your quarter life crisis brought you to our programs, and you've really enriched the learning community here at the university among students.
Can I say one more thing before we
Sure.
transition? It's a real honor to be here because last year I was taking this course as a student. So I relate to a lot of the students here today. Uh, do what you got to do to get the grade, but it's a real honor to now be here on the other side. So thank you, Leslie and Sammy and so many others.
I next wanted to turn to Hajime. Honestly, this panel actually came out of someone recommending that we have you on food literacy. And I think when we reached out to you, you're like, does it make sense to have me on? And it absolutely does. And it sparked in me, an idea that we needed a panel on food waste in a way that maybe we haven't always done before. So composting is vital. It's critical as part of repurposing waste. But, coming at this from a chef's perspective, I find the important role that you're playing is so critical. So I'm curious to know how did you come to, really work on sustainable sushi? What does that mean to you? How do your practices help reduce food waste? How did you get into this work? Why are you doing
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I'm not good with computers, so I want to make sure that everybody can hear me. So thanks for inviting me. I'm kind of oddball here, right? It's just a chef. Like, what is he doing here? So I've been doing the sustainable seafood thing for about like 15, 16 years now. The thing is that people just kind of, I know, sometimes go to the restaurant, go to the, like, of course, people talk about composting and people go like, like at universities. And I've been to a lot of places, but sometimes there's a disconnect between the regular general public and, going to the, those events, or they, there's some, people who only people who care about those things, like on the panels here, and there's a general public who doesn't, give a damn about it, right? So there's a disconnect, and I'm kind of in between kind of thing in terms of like I talk to general public all the time, right? And funny thing is, people ask me why you're doing that. Same as you guys too, but Earth is hurting quite a bit, right? And the ocean is about like 70%. That's what I'm kind of going to talk about a little bit too. And oxygen literally comes like 60-70% of the oxygen comes from the ocean. And every single day there's a news about record temperature to acidity of the water, to all the stuff comes in, and people go to the restaurant like, I don't know, I'm just gonna eat this same thing all the time. And I might even ask you guys of like, what do you guys eat at the sushi bar? And probably all endangered species. That's horrible. But you're gonna go back and do the same thing over and over. That's the problem, right? So that's why I come in and trying to utilize invasive species, food waste. Like, for instance, I'm going to talk about one thing. Let's talk about salmon just a little bit, right? Salmon fishery in Alaska. For the salmon fishery, they waste about, let's go back. So let's talk about salmon eggs, right? Salmon eggs, caviar, right? And usually it comes from the chum salmon, which considered really bad for the meat. So they throw away all the meats, right? And salmon eggs, they just kind of cut it up and just kind of get the eggs and throw away all the meat. 1,000 pounds each day, right? And if you go to the salmon, like a king salmon fishery in the processing plant, they waste about 200 to 300 pounds of the fish eggs each day in each plant. That's why there's a problem. And another thing is that the people always go to the same restaurant and the same thing over and over. You're going to get like tuna. Do you eat sushi, everybody? Right? You're going to get the red tuna. You don't know where it's coming from. Probably there's slave labor involved. And two, yellowtail. The farm raised so horrible way. And even California banned yellowtail because it's so horrible and so many toxins in there, right? And the octopus, probably we waste so much on the one side, but they go to the Mediterranean and get the same species over and over, right? And shrimp, you don't know where it's coming from. So what I'm talking about is that the people, general public, has to change their mind to, so what in season, what is, what's local, stuff like that also. And people just think about agriculture all the time, but at the same time, seafood, they just kind of say, I don't know. At the same time, all the seafood comes from ocean. That's 70% Earth, right? We have to really think about that. So I'm not going to get in too much in detail about it, but I really want people to change their mind about seafood, and don't be scared of asking questions, and don't be scared of trying new things, right? Because that changed a little by little, and some weird one guy making a decision is not going to change anything. And thank you for inviting me, right? And hopefully somebody can have some questions or question to the chefs or any other restaurant that you go to might change just a little bit, right? Then maybe the chef's going to change mind a little bit, or fishermen are going to change a little bit on their mind because of the question you guys ask. And hopefully that's going to change.
Thank you so much, Hajime. We actually had Paul Greenberg who wrote For Fish on just maybe several weeks ago.
That's what I was talking about. Aha,
yeah. So you're really building and adding on to a lot of what he talked about, and it's exciting to hear it from a chef's perspective too. And you think you're the odd person out, but Jamina, I think, is even maybe more of the odd person in a lot of people's minds. But I was really excited about bringing you on, Jamina, to really blow people's minds about what we might consider in this whole aspect, the whole realm around food waste. The way I think about your work is more around nutrient waste, but I'll let you explain, like tell us a little bit about how you got into the work you're doing and kind of a synopsis around what it is that you do.
Thanks, Leslie. I hope that in every space I am introduced as the oddball in the room. My goal, and I think I'm doing very well in life so far in that way. So I think it is important, I think, to back up a little bit and share a little bit about what I do, and then I'll back up even further and share how I got to this work. And so, as Leslie mentioned, I'm the executive director of Rich Earth Institute. We're out in southern Vermont, and the short thing that we do is we turn urine into fertilizer. There is so much nutrients in our human waste, specifically in our urine. There's a lot of nitrogen and phosphorus. And what's happening now with those nutrients is they're going down into the waterways and causing pollution. At the same time, the plants that we grow need those exact same nutrients. They need nitrogen, they need phosphorus. And so we're using a lot of greenhouse gases and we're using a lot of energy and causing greenhouse gases to create those same nutrients. And so we're really embedded in this system right now of polluting with the same nutrients that we are creating to fertilize our crops. So that's what we do at Rich Earth, and we engage in demonstration, education, and research, which is how Leslie and I met through the research branch, and we collaborate a lot with University of Michigan. And so for myself, I studied environmental science and biology when I was in school, and at that point, I hope this has gotten better as I'm speaking to university students. I really hope this has gotten better, but it was such this roller coaster of feeling hope for where we were in the world as humans and what we could accomplish and what we could shift, and then just feeling such deep, dark depression and frustration and anger about where we were and what we weren't doing to be helpful species on this earth. And so I kind of left university feeling like I don't even know how to engage in environmental work at all, and stay like sane and healthy and mentally okay, because this work is just so depressing. And so I stepped away from environmental work for a while. And I was a high school math teacher for a long time out in Oregon. And then there was this like seedling from when I worked on this farm in New Zealand when I was like 18, and they had a compost toilet, and I read the Humanure Handbook, which is all about composting your feces. And that idea just sort of kept percolating. And when I decided I wanted to get back into environmental work, I kept thinking about in what way. And that was kind of the only one that every time I thought about it, it brought me hope. And it was like interesting, and it kept me curious. And so I really loved the idea of shifting my career towards environmental work, but in a field that was hopeful for me. And whenever I talk to folks who are getting into the environmental space, like there's a million things to do. There's a million things that need to get done. Each of us cannot do all of them, but figuring out like what drives you and what brings you hope, and you can sustain a life without going into deep dark depressions as the world brings us challenges, I think is really 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 awesome. And so I love being in that space of I feel like I'm just sort of rerouting pollution to creation. The urine is like, I'm gonna go pollute, and I'm like, no, go fertilize the crops. And I like being that director.
Awesome. Yeah, I've learned, it's been a steep learning curve for me, a new realm of my research, to work with Rich Earth and other collaborators. But what dawned on me is, this is also another way that we're trying to close the loop. So we eat food, and those nutrients are passing through our body, and we're calling it waste when it comes out, and we're putting it into our wastewater system, and then often it's just being flushed into our waterways like Lake Erie and the algal blooms that we see here. So it's fascinating, and it's so vital, and it actually is happening a lot all around the world as I've been learning more about it, and we can get into that more. Some of you began to touch on this. I wanted to know, what are some of the biggest barriers or challenges that you all have encountered in your work when you're trying to achieve the kind of visions that you have for your work? What are those big challenges that you face? And I'll let you all jump in as you feel inspired to say something.
All right. Can I talk a little bit?
Sure, go ahead. And then Reneé after you.
Yeah. So challenges we kind of talked about a little bit too, but the distribution, everything doesn't change, right? It's about cycle. So what it means that everybody uses exactly the same thing. So therefore, the distributor only carries the same thing. So therefore, that the fishermen catch exactly the same thing, right? So roadblock is basically everywhere. So it's really hard at the time that even if I'm trying to get invasive species from the invasive carp from the Great Lakes, there's a roadblock because nobody wants to eat it. So therefore, distributor doesn't want to carry it. So therefore, that the fisherman doesn't want to catch it. It just always there's a roadblock, and I guess that's the really really hard thing to change the system. How can we change it a little bit so that it just breaks something, right? That's what I think about it all the time. Yeah.
Reneé, what were you thinking?
Yeah. So I just want to say, Chefs are some of my favorite people to talk to about this work, because you all are handling it from beginning to end, and you understand, what's happening and how you're preserving food and not throwing it in the trash. And so I just want to say you are not an outlier, oddball at all. Some of my greatest experiences were hanging out with the executive chef at Wayne State University, talking about, not throwing away the materials and actually rerouting them to a farm about 20 minutes away from the university. And that chef went bananas. They changed their uniforms, they changed their signage. So I think chefs are amazing. I just want to put that in the room. For me, the challenge is two things. One, people seeing the system. Systems are all around us, but sometimes people don't connect the dots to the system. So if you say compost to the average person, they only think agriculture, because they can think food. Okay, it was food. Now it's, not, it's soil, amendment. But they don't think about it as the solution. They think about just the loop. They don't think about compost itself, the product, and it as a solution, a system solution. So compost is important for water, for making sure that we don't have garbage and things flowing into the water. We stop those sediments with the soil that we place near our banks. It has solutions, relative to air, the sequestration, aspects, when you can just sprinkle it on your lawn. And, when you think about the air quality and the heat, what we use to plant our trees to make sure we got enough shade. When you look at the development of all the land around our cities and the ability to keep things from pooling and flooding. So part of it is getting people to see all of the amazing power. I talk about the power of compost, helping people see that so that they get a broader understanding of why it's really important, in their lives. The second thing that I find is a challenge is sustaining continuity, getting us to persist on a thing. Everybody eats. Is that true or true? Is there anybody here that doesn't eat? No. So everybody eats all the time. We eat regular every day, most of us, right? And so we're going to continually have this in our environment. And the question is, how do we get some consistency over time as time moves to help design and build and continually bring this into the culture? If you're eating, you're part of the solution. The decisions that you make with the food that you choose not to eat, you can be either part of the solution, or you can keep contributing to the issues with this weather changes and all the other stuff that we're seeing happen, in the earth. So getting some continuity of thought and some persistence in our seeing this as just a natural part of our life, and the choices that we make allow us to be part of the solution or continue to contribute to the problem, and being able to do that, in such a way that it is equitable for everybody. Because guess what? Don't we all eat? Yeah, we do. So it should be possible for everybody. So those are some of the things that I see, have been, barriers along the way, and you just continue to build as you go. Maybe it's one block, one neighborhood, then one community, then one, you know what I'm saying? But I think that those two things, the being able to see it as a system that's all around us and it's affecting, we can affect it, and then the continuity of it in our culture and in our behaviors and in the solutions that everybody can contribute to.
John or Jamina, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I can hop in here. Some of our biggest challenges right now are the fact that we have such an embedded infrastructure around our sanitation and our fertilizer, and a lot of the infrastructure that we have, even though it's a lot of it needs to be replaced or is failing in many ways, it's built for like 50 years, 100 years. Like the infrastructure is trying to be built for a very, very long time out. But that actually creates a pretty inflexible system, right? If you're building something intending for it to be there in 50 years, when circumstances change and all of a sudden the system needs to be managing different inputs, like oh, now we have like all these forever chemicals in our sanitation systems and PFAS and PFOA, and they weren't built to handle that. And it's really hard to pivot with this embedded infrastructure. So challenging those systems has been challenging, and I think it's big work. Regulatory issues come up a lot. We're working with a human waste, and so showing that it can be worked with safely, and that there's ways that can be done, and it can be trusted, has been slow work. Everything we do is fully permitted and with our regulatory body out in Vermont, but it's been slow work. And then also, I think we have a pretty big culture of and sort of limited capacity in our world of sort of dealing with what's most in front of us, right? If there's a climate crisis, or if there's it's just sort of, we can sort of only deal with so much at once. And so a lot of the work for environmental work, food justice work, so much of this is sort of like long-term shifts, and creating like preventative measures or shifting systems. And that can be really hard, especially when there's just like so much stuff in front of us that has to be dealt with immediately. And so doing that work at the same time is really big. And then the last one I wanted to say is a lot of my job is keeping our organization funded. And there are waves throughout time of what types of work get funding. And so being able to always have the resources to support a robust, experienced staff is a constant challenge.
Yeah, they were all great points said there. Speaking of the work with sanctuary farms and sacred spaces on a very granular level, there is the need for more land to do this work, right? And when you think of more land, you have to think of money to be able to acquire that land. Um, so a lot of it has to do with freeing up capital and freeing the land. Capitalism has definitely done a number in their culture, and on a very macro level, I think it's this plastic wasteful culture that we have, where we're looking at things and people as a single use, and that needs to change because there's very much a scarcity mindset. There are a lot of great people doing amazing things on the ground, but there's only a certain amount of grant dollars that are going to be funded for that work, right? And now we're in a political climate in which you can't even say certain words. You have to hide from equity and justice now. And we have to wordsmith our way out of equality. Like this is where we are, and we have to situate the reality of this situation because, of course, it's unfortunate, and to some extent, people just want to look away from it and they don't want to acknowledge it. Um, but that is a real cognitive dissonance that is also a part of our society. Everybody's just trying to move forward to get to what they need and what they got, but not looking around them. And if we don't have a culture in which we're helping one another, like the natural world does, underneath the ground, like, um, the mycelium is a perfect example of that, of how they're constantly in communication, helping plants and trees miles away to make sure they have the nutrition that they need. And we have the ability to do that. We can do that. We have done this in this age of globalization. Um, but getting back to the point, it's this plastic culture that we're in. And it's not only affecting our very environment, it's affecting our interpersonal relationships.
I'm going to just ask one more question, and I want to turn it around. And I want to ask, what encourages you? What gives you hope? What progress or changes are you seeing around food waste prevention or the repurposing of waste in your communities where you work or more widely? As we think about kind of the future that you're trying to build, what is it that keeps you going and that gets you excited about where we're headed that we could build on to even more?
I guess I'll start it off since I was last. I have a very strong love um, at home. Um, Me and my wife have a really beautiful love, and from there, I'm able to, connect with family and community in a way that is from a place of love. And Detroit, as Reneé knows, is a very tight community. Is a very territorial community. But if you win, you win. And it's a situation that I feel very empowered by the many people doing this work, and have been examples of what to do and what not to do at times. But that continually keeps me inspired. I'm also on this spiritual ancestral journey to learn from years past. Um, you know, um, the pendulum is always swinging, right? And this pendulum swinging right now politically is quite stark, and to be very explicit, quite authoritarian. And I'm looking at how have my ancestors gotten through years of that, and how um, is the earth reacting to that? I'm also on this journey of deep ecology, which is not anthrocentric. It's looking at plants as inherent value rather than it being a natural resource for our own consumption. So I see the resilience of trees being able to muster through the spreading of industrial volatile compounds and be able to figure out how to sustain itself. And I know that in my DNA, which is not so far off from a tree, we have like, I believe 50% of our DNA is that of like close to like a tree or a banana, you know? Um, I just feel very connected with the world and people, and maybe this is ideal, but I know love will reign supreme.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, I'll jump in there. Just kind of building on um, the changes that I've seen. So when I first started looking at compost in 2008, you got to go 10, 15 pages back in Google and food waste. It just was not a thing. But I'm a systems process change professional. So when I looked at what was going on at 2008, 9, 10, 11 at that time, there wasn't focus in the system around this. And it was very much a part of the food system, but not a lot of work on it, not a lot of focus. So one of the things that gives me, that encourages me and gives me hope is that's not true today. That is not true today. We've seen massive movement, and some of it very, very rapidly just in the last 5 years. When I track back to the beginning, we were working on the state policy for almost 15 years, 16 years. That's a long time. But it took that to really start to shift the whole state, to move us to a mindset of sustainable materials management and to make that shift away from waste is waste to waste is a resource. So we don't even call it waste anymore. It's a resource, right? And so I've watched that whole progression. I was on the ground fighting for it, so that at the local level we had more opportunity than we did before, by raising the ceiling so that we could do more locally without it bumping up into the state level type stuff. So I've watched that happen at the state level. I've watched it happen at a national level, as well. And so that for me is very encouraging because I believe that we have to have enabled environments. We have to have enabled policy to allow us to do the things that we need to do. Now, mind you, we need to still bump the policy some more because 10% before you get to the highest end is kind of like, okay, risk aversion at work, but better than nothing, right? Better than the 5%. So those kinds of things have given me, great hope and seeing that happen so that we can actually envision and begin to engage everyone in composting. Highest impact is right outside your backyard, put it outside in your yard, all the way up to the community aspects of it, working with others to do it, and then the industrial scale system so that we make sure that where we're eating a lot of food, we can capture it and process it. So that progression, the thing that excites me the absolute most is 5-year-old girls in pink boots harvesting worms by hand. That excites me. My granddaughter is 5. Kyla Michelle's a composter when she introduced herself and just all in. Every time I see her, all she's talking about, grandma, we got to plan this year's compost party. That excites me. Now, the rest of the folks that don't want to hear it, I'm hanging with the 5-year-old girls in the pink boots, harvesting worms by hand, no gloves. So that progression is exciting to me. I think we're headed in the right direction, and we've got more people engaged at diverse scales in doing this. And that's what we need. We need all of it. It's not an either or situation. It's not a local or global. Everybody's eating, remember, right? So we have to do this and we have to make it possible for everyone. So I love seeing the shift and more attention focused on it as a positive and not a negative, that we're working to solve. Yes, we don't want it jacking the climate. What we want is good soil because we need clean air, we need food, we need land, we need water, we need, so I'm watching that shift and that absolutely gets me very, very, excited about this. In addition to those 5-year-old girls in those pink boots.
Hajime, let me ask Hajime real quick to jump in first. You've been doing this also for 15 years. Have you seen any shifts at all in the wider restaurant community or other
Yeah,
aspects?
you guys are so positive. I wish that I can do that. And of course, some chefs are changing in some ways, and I get it. But at the same time, I'll be honest with you, 15 years ago, we had more sustainable sushi bar. It's actually reducing, right? It's really hard because the chefs, some chefs are great, but most of the chefs are lazy. It's really hard because everybody wants, again, it's going to going back to the same thing over and over again. So, it's really tough. The other day I said that, hey, this is an invasive species that we should be eating. People laugh at me. It's really, really hard. But at the same time, I work with the Noah fishery sometimes. And the one thing that I want to talk about is the United States is actually really good with sustainability in fish, right? Even like monkfish. I don't know, you should be eating monkfish. I know it looks kind of gross, but it's really tastes excellent. They actually came back 15 years ago. It was almost endangered, but now we have so much monkfish right now in the East Coast that there's a campaign in Maine that like, hey, eat like monkfish, yay, kind of thing. And I actually did the one recipe for everybody to eat. You should check it out. But at the same time, we have to be really careful about, what we're eating. But other side of the coin is that some of the species, when you leave them alone for several years, I'm not talking about 100 years, right? So just let it be and change just a little bit to the other things, and you eat something else, then they might actually come back. And there's evidence of that. And that's the time that I get so freaking excited. Okay, like I can eat this and this and this. So sometimes gloom and doom, and like, man, you guys are trying to be positive, and I salute to you. It's awesome. Man, it's so hard every single day. And roadblock after roadblock, and you probably think about how many people I can, reach out. And, the moment like this actually excites me because I'm just one chef, but at the same time, I'm talking to those professionals who know so much more than me, and I'm excited, and of course it's hard, but at the same time, we can do this. Just what if we were right? We have the technology, we have the tool to do this, right? So if we can just tell other people just a little bit, hey, it's not this like a weird society that, like so much, of the left do this weird thing. It's an environmentalist, it's not. It's for everybody. Like, everybody's saying we live in the same earth, right? And everybody eats, right? We can do this. We can do this. We can be the same. We can be a same solution to everything that we talk about. So, man, it's depressing, but thank you, everybody. And we have to be positive, right?
But we also have to be real. So I appreciate you also saying, like, yeah, it's really hard work, for sure. Jamina, what are your final thoughts?
Yeah, it is really hard work. I will echo that. I think what brings me hope is that there is change to watch. That it's shocked me over the years as I've been in this field, that everyone I talk to, after like a moment of explaining the why of why we want to reuse the nutrients from our body and the issues that they're causing, no one is like, that's gross, get out of my face. Like, everyone's like, that's really fascinating. And some people are like, I'm really happy that someone is working on that. Some people are not jazzed to like be in it with me, but everyone is like, that makes total sense, and that's really cool. And so that's been fun to watch. And then I also want to say that what we're doing, and it sounds like what a lot of the folks on this call are doing, are not radically new ideas. The idea of taking the nutrients or taking from our bodies, or the nutrients from our food, or building up the soil, or caring for the earth in these ways. These are very ancient ideas. There's no moment when our organization feels like we created the concept of urine recycling. Like, we're really tapping into old ancient concepts of how to care for our earth. And so I think what brings me hope is there's so many spaces where you see that resurgence of desire for ancient knowledge and recognition of the value that those brings, and the challenges that we've put ourselves in by ignoring them for so long. And there's everywhere you look, I think there's ways of seeing that that interest research. There's also everywhere you can look, you can see other things, but you can also see resurgence of interest in those spaces.
Well, you don't go away yet. We're gonna bring you back for questions and answers, that have been coming from the audience. But just to close out this portion of the panel, I just want to thank you all so much for your insight, for your vulnerability to be honest about how challenging this kind of work is, for the visions that you have. It is really patient work. And it's so important that we have leaders like all of you. So thank you again. I'm going to pass this over to Taylor for now.
Thank you, Hajime. Thank you, John. Thank you, Renee. Thank you, Jamina. I personally feel really inspired to be among you, to be learning from you and alongside you, and to just see how food and questions of waste sort of transcend boundaries, professions, disciplines. And it's really great to have all of you here under one Zoom, sharing your expertise with us. So thank you. We are now going to move into our second poll question for the night. So again, if you're a community member, you'll engage with this poll through the Zoom polling feature. Sammy, it does not look like I'm able to launch. Oh, sorry, this is my first time. There we go. Okay, it's open for the community, and I'm going to open it up to students through iClicker. So this poll question touches on some themes that we've just explored. I think John and Renee both went into this a little bit. Composting demonstrates love through A, environmental stewardship, preventing food waste from entering landfills and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. B, community building, creating opportunities for collective environmental action as seen in composting initiatives. C, generational responsibility, leaving behind a better world for future generations. Or D, all of the above. It looks like we have a pretty unanimous response here. 95% of our community members said D, all of the above. And we had about 2% for environmental stewardship and 2% for generational responsibility. No right answers here, but yes, we're going with all of the above on this one. Okay, transitioning into our next poll question. Bear with me here, navigating technology. Okay, question 3, launching that. Okay, there we go. Wait, Sammy, there we go. Okay, she's open. Launching question 3 for students. Composting mirrors the process of love itself. Like relationships, composting, A, takes time to unfold and to develop. B, requires careful attention and consistent care. C, gets messy during development, requires willingness to embrace messiness. D, requires commitment to ongoing cultivation, but creates something nourishing and transformative. Or E, all of the above. All right, pretty similar situation here. We have 93% of community members saying E, all of the above. As for our students, about 73% are saying E, all of the above, and about 20% of folks are saying D, requires commitment to ongoing cultivation, but creates something nourishing and transformative. Again, no right or wrong here, but we are going to go with E, all of the above. Okay, wrapping up our poll here. I am going to quickly pass to Lydia again for the engagement portion for our participants who are participating, for lack of a better word, in the Zero Waste Challenge. So Sammy, would you mind? There we go. Lydia, passing it to you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Taylor. So like I mentioned at the beginning, if you're here with the Zero Waste Challenge, or if you newly joined, welcome. We saw some of this coming through. please go ahead and scan this, or I'm also going to put the same link into the chat, and just answer something impactful that you learned today. It can really be anything, big or small, from any of the wonderful panelists, and that will count as your attendance and prize entry. If you, I'm sorry that the QR code on the first slide didn't work. My apologies. If you would still like to join, you can also answer this question, and that will join you directly to the challenge. So just give people a couple minutes to do that. And thank you, challenge members, for coming today, for listening, for learning. And for everyone else, we welcome you to join anytime that you'd like. So yeah, like I said, that link is also in the chat. So if you need some time to think about it, or if you'd like to wait till after the Q&A, maybe there's something you want to put in the Q&A. There's no wrong answers here at all. So you can answer anything that you like. And now passing it to Benedict for the Q&A portion.
Thank you everyone for coming. I will call back our panelists for the Q&A session. And I would like to thank all of them, Jamina, Hajime, John. Are you back? Are you coming back?
We can't turn on our cameras, I don't think, at the moment, or I can't.
Oh, you can't turn on your camera. Okay.
It says the host has stopped it.
Oh, I think you're back. And Reneé, thank you. Thank you for being back. So I just want to say how special it is for me, this panel, because I'm also very much interested in food. And I've said it before in our first session of the semester that I've been raised dumpster diving with my mother in France. And I didn't know back then that there was a fancy word for it, which was being freegan, which is a word that was coined in the 1990s. And so I was particularly interested in what John said that we mentioned about your own identity, how you relate to waste in general, and how you relate to food waste. And depending on your social class and your race and your own experience, what does it feel? What does it mean to feel wasteful? And how do you address that? So I was particularly interested in that. And related to that, this is the first question that I have for all of you from Ciaran, having to do with social class. What does building long-term sustainable composting systems look like in the context of increased gentrification? Does anyone want to take this one? Which makes me also think of, when it comes to the chef perspective, the gastronomy and the high-end cuisine around food waste, and even the gentrification of certain food movements like veganism and freeganism as well. I don't know if you're aware of it, but in Paris we have a restaurant called the Pony Restaurant, which is actually a freegan restaurant that is also very trendy about recycling food waste. Does anyone want to talk about gentrification and the context of food waste? And yes,
so you kind of called a chef, so I'm going to talk just a little bit, I guess. We waste food all the time. Oh my God, I'm sorry. I'm going to go back a little bit over like food waste in terms of like where Japan come from, right? I grew up in Japan, and I believe that my grandma used to eat, use everything, like all the fish head and everything. Everything's used, everybody's talking about this is not like a new concept. Everything's old. Like we used to not waste that much at all, but the big corporation comes in and waste. That's number one. Number two, somehow that the food waste, like for instance, that the more you waste, the cool it is for the fine cuisine. Sometimes, I only use this part of this, like entire, animal and wasted everything, and that's so cool. And that kind of concept for people, like we, make the miso soup from all the fish bones and the stuff that I put on the side when I cut it, right? Most of the chefs, they throw that away and get new products to make the stock, right? Grandma used to make it in a way that it's just like, okay, you're gonna waste it, like don't waste it, right? So the economics changed quite a bit. And even I saw Japan becoming really rich, and we used to start wasting so much. It was so disgusting. And that kind of social shift from the entire country to see that was really, really hard to see. And I'm, again, like I probably do more like what my grandma used to do. It's not a new concept, use everything, right? Because you don't know when you're going to catch the food, like if this seafood next. It's a it's a good concept of like you don't know when you're going to harvest the vegetable next. Like that's the same idea, but I feel like it's just like entire economy is evolved around this like a huge corporation making a entire thing and just waste. And sometimes in the restaurant, more you waste, the cooler it gets, and that part of restaurant kind of conception, like image of it, I guess, I hate it. I freaking hate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Hajime. Anyone else has anything to say? Or
I'd like to flip the
Reneé.
question. Yeah, I want to flip the question.
Yes.
Because I think that the opportunity is to look at, we're establishing an economy. And so instead of, like some of the other alternatives that existed before. So before in Detroit, all of the food waste went into the incinerator. Now we know incinerators are not good things, and they habitually have been placed in neighborhoods of people of color. And so when I look at the solutions we're talking about, we're not talking about something that is harmful. Done well, again, done well, we're able to manage this as a resource. And so having it in your neighborhood is actually a benefit to you. Those resources are staying in your economy and staying in your neighborhood. The product that you're producing from the recycling of those resources stays in your neighborhood. You can buy it here, you can sell it here. You don't have to have it shipped in from way out there somewhere. And all of that, jobs can be created, people can learn things, and so to me, part of the opportunity is actually flipping that narrative so that we don't see it as gentrification. We focus on it as equitable participation, equitable opportunity to be a service provider, equitable opportunity to receive the services, equitable opportunity to have access to the product to use to solve your local problems and situations. So for me, it's a flip of that. And I think that that's where we have the opportunity to carry a different message. Done inappropriately, yes. I mean, large things like that can be done, and it does gentrify because to the point that these are land-based businesses, but done properly and done well, now you own that land, you're in the community, you're using the land, the products are yours. It becomes very, very circular in nature, and we can avoid some of those typical issues that tend to surround these kinds of solutions. And that's our opportunity to tell that story.
Thank you, Reneé. Thank you very much. Oh,
Yeah,
John?
yeah,
Yeah, something.
First, I want to say a disclaimer. Owner of a business. So boom. I what stifled me when this question was asked was not the composting long term. I think there's many solutions out there for that, and it's being worked on, but the gentrification part stumped me. And I think it stumped me because of the fact we should have systems in place that can last and everyone should be doing it. But when we talk about gentrification, essentially we're talking about displacement, right? Displacement of people's cultures, and their connection to the land. And that has a lot to do with capitalism. And when we think about these systems in place, they're all interconnected, but capitalism has an overarching presence in a lot of our interactions because if you have access to a lot of capital, you're able to wield power um, unfairly or fairly. But just by the means of having capital, essentially you're able to do a lot of what you want to do. Um, so I struggle with that, and as I said, a business owner, a person who has to work through this. But I do think, um, as a species, we need to work through other models. I think it has leveraged us a lot of progress in some ways, but tons of disparity. And gentrification is a means of that by way of folks being able to wield their capital to displace people, right? So that is what stumped me because you have to address that first. But if let's say we had a system which was equitable, right? I do think we could have long-lasting, sustainable composting systems put in place. But also part of that, one reason why composting is not looked at as a possible solution, because there is a lot of money to be made by harming the environment, right? One of the biggest things that the waste industry does not compost is because when they don't, it produces methane. They sell that methane. They don't want to stop that business. And there are incentives to continue that business. So these are just the butt naked truths that we have to talk about. Because again, as we've all been saying, this is not new work. This is ancestral indigenous work. That is nothing new. What is new and innovative about it, that there's people that have decided to say, we're all old here. Fuck it. This is something that needs to be done. This is something that is very integral to our very existence. Excuse my French, no pun intended. But that's just the truth that we need to work through to get to a space that we can do what is right for people and environment.
Thank you, John. Thank you. I have 1 more minute that I would like to give to Jamina. A very quick question from Dennis. Jamina, are you able to speak about the article in the New Yorker? I don't know if you saw it, called Phosphorus Saved Our Way of Life, which highlights the coming global shortage of phosphorus and how that will impact the yield of food crops. Have you seen this article in the New Yorker?
Yes, it actually highlights our work.
Yeah.
And they interviewed us out in Brattleboro, and a large part of the article is about urine's role in the phosphorus crisis. I'm not sure what is being asked specifically, but I will mention that so phosphorus is a finite resource, and there's debate right now about phosphorus is an essential element for food crops, and it is currently under debate a bit about when we're going to hit peak phosphorus. But there is this idea that we're going to reach peak phosphorus, and there won't be enough for the future, and so there's work being done, including some of the work that we're doing, of how do we use the phosphorus that's already in our systems, including from our urine or from our sewage systems. And I do want to just put a little disclaimer that as I said at the beginning of this session, a lot of our work is simultaneously to protect the water from having too many nutrients in it, and then also to provide the nutrients necessary for the crops, right? And in some waterways, the really big culprit is too much nitrogen, and in some waterways, the culprit is actually too much phosphorus. And so there are areas where because of the makeup of the soil or because of the manure that's being put on, there's actually too much phosphorus going into the earth and then running off into the waterways. And so when we have urine programs in those spaces, we actually remove the phosphorus from the urine, which we can do, and then we take it to somewhere else, just like the phosphorus in powder form, essentially in solid form from the urine. And then we bring it to a place that's actually low in phosphorus. So it's an interesting ability to put the nutrients where they're actually most useful and least harmful. I'm not sure if that answers the question that was asked.
Yeah, it does. I just wanted to hear more about your project. And if anyone hasn't seen it, the little informational video from Michigan is amazing. And I've shared it already with a lot of people. So thank you for that. And thank you to all of you, to the panel. Thank you. It was one of my favorite topics to talk about food waste and how to recycle and compost and what to do. So thank you all for coming today. I think it was really a great, inspiring panel. Just a few words now, very quick few words about 2 announcements, and then about our speaker next week. On February 20th and March 20th, join Rooting for Change Cafe. This is a space for students to come together, eat yummy food, and learn a new skill. This event is hosted by the Sustainable Food Program for and by students. Learn more on our Canvas page. And also, there is a request for student performers for Bite-Sized. a food-themed variety show. Proposals are due February 28. The bite-sized variety show will be held on April 2nd to highlight student work, cultural traditions, creative expressions surrounding local, regional, and global approaches to food justice. And finally, I hope you will be able to join us all next week for our speaker, Hannah Whitman. Hannah Whitman is a professor in the Faculty of Land and Food Systems at the University of British Columbia in Canada. This talk will discuss the concepts of agroecological transitions, food sovereignty, and planetary health. We will illustrate these concepts through exploring the work of agroecological networks in Ecuador and Brazil that connect growers and consumers through participatory certification, food literacy, and solidarity actions. For students and locally based community members, join us in person at the University of Michigan Marsall Family School of Education building in room 2002. Thank you very much for coming tonight, and thank you, and I wish you all a really good evening. Thank you, and bye.
Compost, everybody. Peace.
Bye. Thank you.